we can go live here.
More potatoes to plant, man.
Me too. I got the sweet potatoes in the giant planters for the weekend here, and I've been tilling the back for the last 4 or 5 days, trying to get all the roots and stuff out and getting ready. So it should be starting off here in about 3, 2, 1, and maybe you could double check on your end. I got 17 people watching right now. There's going to be about a 30-second delay here, so.
No, it's pretty good. It's like 4 seconds.
Okay, I'm talking about making the image come out. Oh, there we go. Yeah, the actual delay is about 10 or 15 seconds from the video. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. As always, when you hear me start the videos, good afternoon. I'm here with Ice Age Farmer, you know Christian already. A plethora of information in today's strange world. You know, he and I, we could talk for 16 or 20 hours about the crop losses in the places that are getting cooler than last year and their record snows and blizzards and everything. But this live stream right here today is about bringing you up to the minute information on what we're thinking about in terms of growing, because you could, wherever you look across the landscape currently, you can go ahead and find an enormous amount of negativity and darkness and scariness and fear across the internet. Turn on anything and you will come across it in about 2 seconds. Well, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the solutions, because as far as I've seen scrolling through, you know, there are some informational bits out there, but I'm hoping that we can put together right now something about agriculture, because it is all about the food. You know, to be able to have some sort of antibody test and then, you know, have that as a passport so you can even enter a supermarket or enter a place that sells food, holds food. That's scary, because they won't let you access the food until you could toe to a few other measures first. So I want to go around that completely. Don't even want to be involved in that system. And I want to know that I, you know, am sharing information that I think is valuable and knowledgeable. So Christian, kick it off here, because right before we came on live, that's what we wanted to do tonight, was bring a positive, hopeful message to you for your weekend here, to set off the rest of your Friday night so you can feel good, talk to people in a happy, positive mood, and then move into tomorrow, especially Saturday. You got a full day to do planting, and Sunday, try to roust anybody you can. And hopefully the words we speak tonight will maybe, you know, spur you into action, or maybe you can talk to somebody else and it'll get them active as well by showing, you know, what we're talking about tonight. So Christian, thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you, David, for having me back. I'm thrilled to be here. And yeah, I'm eager to talk about how we move forward from here. You know, we've been talking about food shortages and the things that have been lying ahead for years now. And so to see it now reported in the mainstream media means we can now go on and talk again. We can look forward at what needs to come next. And so I think when we're in the middle of watching modern agriculture's wholesale demolition and a controlled, deliberate demolition, then it makes sense to think about how we respond intelligently. And clearly, when they're taking away food, when that's the weapon that they've been plotting here, and that's the weapon that communists have used for a long time, right? This is a global Holodomor situation playing out, where they want to starve people out until we submit to a global totalitarian state. And so the weapon, the defense and the weapon, it turns out, against that is a distributed, decentralized model for growing food. If they are ripping down the systems that produce food, and we need to rapidly be standing up new systems, lots of them, that can do the job and as quickly as possible. And that means taking action now. It's not enough to be just aware of what's going on. Consciousness alone isn't going to solve this. It takes action. And so that's why I think we should focus there tonight.
And another thing, you know, we think about farmers market as might being the saving grace as we come into the spring and then the summer. There's going to be an enormous amount of local vegetables. And I think that we're going to be going back to this more and more. And if you learn how to can or how to dry something, especially when it's coming in season, green apples right now for us are in season. So I've been trying dehydrating an enormous amount of those. We were making applesauce. We cooked them down. We made different diffusions out of it. Again, dried slices, whatever. But we've seen in the call by the congressmen and women to make sure that China halts all wet markets. So with the weaponized food, you have to wonder when it's going to come to us, and they're going to say no more farmers markets because you might have mishandled the food. There could be something on the food. It can only go through this process or this agency or this area first, and you have to come to it. There's no more farmers markets. I could already see that as part of the play. So think about the seasonality of foods, because you can barter and trade. And, if apple trees start to go off, you don't have to, there's tons of apples that come out of a tree. So if you're able to get these and then do something with them in season, you can kind of usurp this whole, needing to come away from the farmer's market. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but.
Yeah, and just to be clear, there are already plenty of farmers markets that have been shut down, and farmers who were, there was an LA Times article about a farmer who was planning to take their goods to market. The market was shut down, and they were literally just sitting there in tears. And so this is happening. They are demolishing the routes that farmers and ranchers have had to get them to markets. But better talk tonight about some of the meat processing plants that have been shutting down, and the way that is systematically being dismantled so that producers don't have any place to take their meat right now. And that ties in, of course, to the all of these agendas: the meatless agenda, the insect protein that was described at great length in last year's UN IPCC food and land use report, where they put out these talking points about, we don't want you to be able to eat meat, we don't want animal agriculture at all, we want to tax food waste like they do in South Korea. And so these things have been sort of tested around the world where they could push the population that far. But right now, in this massive seizure of fear, this huge thing that's playing out around the world, they finally got teeth to push through that agenda. And so we're seeing that.
And I'll add in my 2 cents, I guess. My story of the week would be in the Northeast around Massachusetts up to Maine. They're going to cull 3 million chickens because they can't get the soya meal up there for the food for the animals. And again, we keep seeing this over and over and over and over. The labor shortage, the people that are not there to be able to feed the animals, take care of the animals, pack the animals or the chickens. And they're going to cull approximately 3 million. And that came off AgFacts and one of the news wires as well, AgriCensus. And if they're talking about this many chickens just in a very single small area in the Northeast US, you can see it happening across. So that's one. So there's at least a poultry supply that's going to get cut at the knees because some excuse, there goes the food again. We see it again. It's an excuse. Oh, food gone. Excuse, food gone. Here's chickens gone.
Yeah, it's appalling. And we've seen the footage already coming out of those farms. And, we can step back and say that I don't need to support factory farming to know that these are currently the way that a great number of people around the world are being fed. And so there's, I'd love to get rid of those things and replace them, phase them out, right, with a regenerative approach. But you can't just turn off the food system overnight. You lose the entire stability of civilization. And, when we talk about those meat packing plants, I was reading today, this is just mind-blowing, that Tyson was actually they were shutting down the Sioux Falls plant and a couple others, and then taking people from those plants that were exposed to infected people and moving them to other plants, which it doesn't take, an infectious disease specialist to realize that they're just moving this exposure from one plant to the next and then shutting that one down too. So it's you cannot conceive that is anything but a deliberate planned attack to take out our meat processing plant, and that is flowing into the attack on ranchers.
And again, how convenient is the excuse? Well, the meat's now contaminated. It can only go through a new government agency that shall jump up like a spring mushroom in the future. The new, look for it. It'll be beyond the USDA. It'll be its own thing, specifically targeted with finding some sort of disease contaminant on top of the meat. But to slow down in the supply chain at that point, or they'll say, we have to destroy everything. We can't really clean it, so it has to be destroyed. So I could see again, this is like the one single excuse that covers everything for centralized control from the farm all the way until the supermarket's controlled by the military here coming up in short order. And it is an agenda, I firmly believe, because how many times can we tick the box of, oh, wait, that fits. Oh, now there's pork's gone. Now the chicken's gone. What's next? The cattle?
Yeah, absolutely. They've been shutting down those processing plants, not altogether, but greatly slowing their rate, saying that we have to distance our workers and take special precautions. And so their capacity to move meat through is greatly diminished. And that means that they've got full weight animals that have to keep being fed. In many cases, you got to think of things as like a production line. And in many cases, if there's a backup here at the processing plants, which are absolutely, I would say, sort of the most critical part. They're sort of where things come together between the producers and then before retail is this critical part. And that's what's shutting down right now. And so the production is still there, but it has no way of getting to the consumers. There's actually the former Secretary of Agriculture, I got his name written down, Tom Vilsack, actually did a CNN. I posted this clip of him interviewing on CNN to my Ice Age Farmer Resources channel, because I keep my channel clear of anything that YouTube could possibly take down. But still, get off YouTube, head over to BitChute. I know we both have channels there. Tom Vilsack, former governor of Iowa, came out and said, we're seeing massive disruptions, and there's a cascading series of events here where, yes, they just shut down schools and restaurants, and then there's dislocations, but that translates then into the processing delays. And that means that and he sort of played out how this happens. And he stopped short of going too far into shortages, but there was a document that actually was leaked from the FEMA DHS virus task force that described at great length the timetable that it would take from as these things grind to a halt, where it's like it's only 2 to 3 days for dairy, and then a couple more days for some of the poultry and eggs, and then a couple weeks you have of fresh vegetables in the pipelines here. And so it looks like if nothing changes over this next, it's a good thing actually that people are taking to the streets right now and protesting this virus, because if nothing had changed, then I think May and June timelines are going to look really rough and uncomfortable in a number of ways. And that's why, coming back to the main point of today, that's why we all have to start growing our own food now, with the focus on things that can help people bridge this gap we're looking at right now.
And with that being said, I would like to hammer home a couple different points. Not only the frosts that have destroyed almost all the fruit again and vegetable that's being grown in Europe, but the labor shortages. See, the thing that's coming up that's not being featured in the news very much here is China's planting is so far behind that I would call them a no plant 2020. They're experiencing fertilizer and potash. What else do they? Pesticides and herbicides. They're having difficulty even getting these to the local farmers inside China. There's been a second lockdown going on right in the middle of what are we considered our Kansas grow area, right in the middle of the heartland of their corn and wheat area. The no planting going on, and the locusts are coming over, and they finally have come through Myanmar over into Western China. That's going to be something to contend with. Europe's in a no plant, plus they just had the mega freeze. And the US, the flooding, the spring 2020 forecast out, delayed planting again. So it's just kind of reiterate when Spanish and German, and who else was that? Italian farmers talking about shortages of vegetables and food and fruit over there. And then we see Natural News picking up, talking about the Canadian shortages coming. And then what we're talking about here inside the United States, plus what's being widely reported in China. Like, you got to take a serious look that something is not right. And the information of you getting more self-sufficient for some reason is still being hidden. Like, if I was a congressperson, I would be screaming at the top of my lungs to everybody in my state, get a garden going right now. And, you give out an enormous amount of information on how to contact the co-ops, because this is the perfect time to do it. Not only is the moon phase coming in for, nice planting again next week, but you could get a bunch of trees and different types of things from these co-ops and learn a little bit more about your local area. But nobody wants to talk about this.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that super chat saying gardeners say you shouldn't do too much so you don't get overwhelmed. I would actually agree with that in general, and that's why I've been putting a lot of emphasis on those calorie crops, potato, squash, especially squash, winter squash that can keep throughout a long winter, and Jerusalem artichokes will stay in the ground. These things, you dig them up when you need them. They're like, it's money in the bank, except we're talking about food in the ground that you're waiting until you need it. And they're all prolific too, right? So one little sunchoke you can cut up into a ton of little tubers that'll take over. Some people consider it invasive. So I just wanted to mention that you can do that. You can focus on a few things so that you nail them, and you can actually have good results in terms of caloric, nutritive production, and it's something that's prolific for the rest of your neighborhood. So I just want to throw those things out.
Lee Spartan, thank you. Sunchoke, give you the sunchoke high five. Thank you.
Did I lose you, David? Well, I hope you can still hear me. But on your point about wheat, Russia actually just today also suspended their exports of wheat, which is, we've been talking about this for years. Again, it's you're exactly right. Like, all the effects of the grand solar minimum that we've been talking about for years, these crop failures mounting, the eventual now shutdown of international trade, where Russia says we're not going to export wheat, we're going to keep it for ourselves. The UN describes this as crazy nationalist protectionist policies and says that could exacerbate global food shortages, but it's just a sensible thing to do, and act on behalf of your people first. And yeah, adding to that, Kansas just lost a lot of wheat this past weekend with the frosts down there, the storms down there. And that's on top of US having the smallest wheat plantings in some time. So all of these problems that we've been discussing and kept an eye on, that was sort of the slow burn, has now just ignited full force with the viral situation. And we can see that the government is clearly, unfortunately, not going to help us in achieving a soft landing from that grand solar minimum drop in crop production. In fact, they are sort of showing their hand completely over these last few weeks in the direction they're moving with testing the waters with the seed, banning sales of seed. And people can tell that's not, there's no rational reason to keep people from buying seeds. And so it just doesn't make sense. And I think people can smell something wrong with that. And that's helping to push people that weren't necessarily thinking about it before towards growing your own food. And so it's helping us to spread the word in a lot of ways. But yeah, it tells us they're not going to be helping us here. And so it is up to us, and I mean all of us now, to take action, to start growing these things, to arm our neighbors with the seeds and with the tubers, and produce as much food as we can in a decentralized fashion as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's all Britt. Thank you for that. And I would agree, it's going to start with the mind frame first of what we have in terms of local produce coming in a different season that you're going to have to shuffle through. The globalization you alluded to, I think it's over, and we're not going to be getting strawberries and any fruit at any time of the month from any country across the world like we used to, just simply from the amount of non-sales going on, the amount of non-voyages, or they call ghost voyage, where it's a completely empty ship coming back. Blank sail is another term for that, what they call it. So think about, we have to go more back into our grandparents' time. And I've been always talking about the hashtag think like your grandma, because, that's what they did. What our grandparents used to do was when things come in season, they stocked it. Like you're talking about, pumpkins are quite easy to keep, potatoes and that sort of thing. But it's going to be a mind shift first before we move into, canning and dehydrating and storing and making sauces and different kind of tea and herbal tinctures and things, moving with every part of the plant that we can use. It's going to take a full mind shift, and others are going to have to come with you as well, because to do all the work by yourself is kind of unrealistic. You're going to be spending 5 to 6 hours per day just to grow enough food to feed yourself. And then, if you have others around you that just want to sit around, well, there'll still be food in the store. It's just going to be a full radical mind shift of availability and supplementing what you can grow yourself. So I think, taking this sustainability is going to be a mind step as well, between putting those fingers into the soil,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say there. It's a complex set of problems, and so there are different things you can do. And I think growing your own food is part of it. Aligning though with people who are existing ranchers and producers in your area, like I said, they're in many cases used to having one kind of a market, and now they're really quickly needing to move to direct to market sales. And so if you can help them, by purchasing their product, that's great. It's more nutritive than the stuff in the store that's no longer in the stores anyway. But also, like, if you're a webmaster, if you're out of work now, you can go help these people out. And I don't just mean with labor, which they probably need in their operation, but you can hook them up with it. If you're a webmaster with a shopping cart, and bring them into the world of online sales, or offer to, I don't really know, whatever it is that's in your background that is a unique skill set. There's a ton of needs for us, like I said, to be creating a new system as they tear down the one that's been feeding most people. And all of us have a part to play in that.
Yeah, Renee, thank you for the kind generosity there. Now, thinking about this, Italy had done something called the time bank, where people traded skills. So if you were a doctor, doesn't matter, 1 hour is 1 hour. And people would donate the hour of time for a thing. Okay, I would clean your teeth and you would come and fix my door. So a carpenter and a dentist, of course, would trade 1 hour of time. But you obviously had to buy they're not going to give you a free door. You'd have to purchase whatever it is or have it, and that person's skill set to then put it together, improve it, or do whatever. 1 hour of time is 1 hour of time. And see, that's a constructive way to try to get everybody's skill set assessed and figure out what people can do in order to help the whole, because not everybody's going to be a farmer. And that's another thing to realize too. Like a carpenter or a blacksmith or somebody or tech person is not going to absolutely change and go, I'm just going to go straight into plant all the time every day. That's not their thing. That's why they've chosen to do what they've done already. So it's going to be a combined skill set where there's still strengths inside a certain subset of a very specific niche of, again, what you're talking about, a skill. And, starting to talk with people about the skills they have. And, before long, if you have 2 or 3, 4 or 5 people talking, then, there's a lot of information and knowledge there. And who do they know? And again, it's going to be more local. It's going to be your neighbors, maybe your friends and family, people you used to work with. But again, they're going to have to be pretty close. You're not going to be able to do this with somebody 50 miles away.
And it feels good, right? So I already have people. I guess let me back up to your point that there are a lot of people who are still waiting for the stores to go back to normal, who just think this is going to blow over and then things will go back to normal. And so yes, there will be those of us who are aware of what's going on are going to have to put in more work right now up front. We're going to have to, if we want this to work out well, if we want to have that soft landing, then it's up to us, like I said, to start growing more food than we can possibly eat or plant or take care of, because I have faith that these people are going to come online. I already have lots of neighbors and friends who are saying, it's actually, they didn't have any interest in a garden before, they were doing whatever it was, but suddenly, and perhaps it has to do with the empty shelves or the government banning seed sales, suddenly they want to have a garden. It sounds really good to them. And I don't mind at all spending time with them or going over to their place and sort of seeing where the sun hits, showing them how to think through where to put things so that they'll grow well, and how to structure the dietary needs of their family, and try and chip away at that with what they can grow really easily. It doesn't necessarily take, in fact, it can't take a huge capital investment at this point in time to get started. But so I think as that goes on, yes, you're right, there will be a significant amount of education that goes on, and that's just going to be an organic thing that filters out. I posted this video of a crystal in a super saturated solution, because when you get the solution super saturated, and then you give it the seed crystal, and it just spreads throughout the medium, and there's no single molecule that's running around coordinating it. It's just a natural thing that falls into place. And I think we have to be aware that right now, and this, you said up front, this is a scary time, and I think people are afraid, not chiefly because of the bioweapon that people are talking about, but because of all the changes and the speed at which they're coming out, and they're grieving for the normalcy and what the ability to anticipate what might happen tomorrow. That's gone now. It's all just like this rolling disaster that keeps changing every day, and there's no chance to catch your breath and find stable footing. And so I think giving people a sense of the need to, I forget where I was going with that, but I think giving people the need to the ability to stand on the surety of investing in the future. When you plant a seed, you're creating that future, and you're starting to imagine that future. And so the speed of change that's happening right now is being used, right, by the powers that be, who never let a crisis go to waste. You better believe they have their agendas ready to go, and they are grafting that structure onto reality, trying to put it in there with all these changes. And that's why we have to be going out right now. This is not a time for staying inside and drinking quarantinis. We have to go outside and start drinking food so that we can inform this new structure, because it's crystallizing whether or not you want it to. And we have to be part of shaping that, or else it'll be their vision. And I don't want to live in the vision they describe.
Speaking of shapes, do you notice that tree over your left shoulder looks like a heart? Is anybody else seeing that in your background there, Christian? Over to your left, there's a heart. The whole tree looks like a heart at the top there, the way the branches have split off. Excellent. And yeah, like, how would you get the conversation started? Because it sounds, as if you've had some good luck with getting the conversation started, and then getting people to listen, and then getting them to go to action. So what did you break in with first? Because I'm sure a lot of people are having this with their relatives. Wherever I look, they're not really arguing, but it's just like one person doesn't believe it's going to get that bad as the next person, or they think it, like you say, it's going to return to something normal, which it's not. We're into a new era. This is a new farming technique, a new management system for Earth has been put in place. If you haven't realized that, it's there. So how do you break through without being offensive, and bring people into the discussion? Because there's so many levels of, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be medium, we're going to go back to normal next week, on May 1st we'll be back to normal. So you got all these ranges here. Any ideas for everybody out there listening?
Well, for me, the conversations that go best are the ones where they've had some time to think about it, and they come back to you and they say, I would like to have a garden, or they just ask some sort of like probing questions, like, hey, how is it that you get the potatoes to grow in a container? And like, I'll sort of like dance at that level for a second, and at some point I'll break through and like, all right, are you trying to feed your family? Because I think we can have a broader conversation about how you structure your dietary needs, and then start to like target different levels of caloric output out of the space that you have. And I love having those conversations, because to me, it feels like we're bringing more people onto the team. This is more food that's being produced that I don't have to plant and water and keep track of. So it feels like there's just more people coming on the team. And it's awesome.
And one thing over in Asia too, community gardens are very popular, where they're waiting for a building to be built somewhere and they know it'll be 2 years out. Maybe it's sold, it's slated for development, but nobody's even bid in on it. So it'll be 4 or 5 years out. What they do is they take those areas, and we're talking about an office building or apartment building. It's a pretty large space, over an acre there. That would be the foundation. And they just turn it into a garden, and everybody in the neighborhood comes in and works. And at different times, they know who's there and who's not. I mean, you could come by and pick an apple if you never worked in it, but generally it's all the neighbors around the area putting it together, and it's a community space. But here in the United States or in places in Europe, it's more like somebody's private yard. So again, different ways to think about this and overcome some of what we've already been trained. Like, that's private property, that's mine, that's yours. Why don't we share it all? Like, how willing are the neighbors to share and open up parts of their yards as well? But then we have all this litigation where if you fall and you trip and then somebody go, oh, you're on your property, you're going to go sue them. So there's this fine line between, the old world we've been in, where there's so much like, don't come across my property, to, hey, let's open it up and all grow food together. And if we did it for 3 yards together or something like that across the front or backyards, you could have an enormous amount of food being grown on multiple properties. It's just, that concept of a community garden getting set in, because here in the States, I don't know where you could just go start plunking down a bunch of seeds for the community without somebody coming by and saying, oh, it's interfering with the zoning laws. Oh, that's somebody's private property over there that was going to build a building. You can't do that. Versus other more, just winging it. If nobody's using the property, we'll let other people use it until it's actually built on. And there's going to be a lot of defaulting. I saw 30% of people did not pay mortgages last month, and rent. Maybe it was 60% mortgage no payment and rent was 30% no pay. But any kind of new development is going to be off the slate for a while. So if there are properties near you that are going to be developed that are just those bare lots, take them over and start growing food on them as a community garden.
Yeah, there was a cool project in Detroit a few years ago, because they sort of were ahead of the rest of us in terms of their demise. But taking some of those empty lots and tearing down the old homes that were in disrepair and starting to grow food on there. And that's, I think that's sort of a nice iconic way of thinking of what we're doing here. There's a lot of stuff that's just been torn down. 1 in 10 Americans just lost their job. They're letting people out of jail. We got to realize that those rules you're talking about, like the liability concerns, we're just gonna have to get over it at this point. Those rules, in a lot of cases, don't apply anymore. That's why they're able to let people out of jail. And I mean, they are breaking all the rules already, because, like I said, they are imposing this new, gradually totalitarian system on everyone. And it's a really weird way that they're going about it. Just sort of a piece at a time. It's like they've got food on your plate that you come down to every night, but like each night there's like a little bit less. And they're like, oh, it'll be back tomorrow, and you're back tomorrow, but there's a little bit less. And like, yeah, sorry, we had this hang up. It'll all be fine tomorrow. It's like this, they keep sort of chipping away. It's a very sociopathic approach to the liberties and the economy and all these things being whittled away. But yeah, we got to realize that those rules aren't applying anymore, and that's what's enabling them to come and just break everything. And so we can't play necessarily by a lot of those things that we're keeping, like guerrilla gardening. I mean, we should all be just planting seeds. Like I said, planting seeds where we can and where they'll grow is, I think it's totally on the table now. If you want to call that civil disobedience, then baby, I'm all for it. Guerrilla gardening is absolutely something that I think we should be considering right now, in fact.
Yeah, survival gardening, and then in LA, they had a group of people in a more impoverished neighborhood took over a yard, turned it into this most amazing garden. A lot of news stories on it, magazines, and then the city came in and bulldozed it. But at what point now do we start? Okay, that was 5-8 years ago. Well, what point do we come now where we say, all right, these police are coming in, the army's coming in to destroy the entire 4 or 5 acre garden that all of us, 50 of us or 100 of us, worked on for an entire summer, and we have tons and tons and tons of food there that's ready to be harvested, and they want to come in with their dozers and take that away. There's going to be some rule changes here as we move forward to protect food too, because that's exactly what they did in LA. Was just came in, oh, it's Walmart property or one of these big stores. Like, I think it was Walmart, as a matter of fact. And they said, oh, we're going to use this for a facility, and they just went and bulldozed it, and they never came back and did a thing with it. It was just smoke and mirrors to destroy the gardens, because the people were becoming so self-sufficient. They were growing tons and tons of different cabbage and lettuce and zucchinis and squash and all these things that we would need. And they're really healthy for you as well. And you can't kid me that you think about juicing fresh plants and eating fresh vegetables and thing. You're going to need those micronutrients to keep your immune systems healthy. And at some point, it's going to push coming to shove over authority trying to take over what you grew. And where does that leave us? That's a whole another set of rules to contend with here moving forward.
That's true. And I certainly never discount the ability of the state to ruin good productive efforts. I think that's pretty much what they do. And so that's a risk. Yes, that's a risk. It is, after all, a food war. That's why I started talking about food wars going into 2020, although it's become a hot war much more quickly than I would have liked. And yeah, so we'll just have to take that risk. And that's why we go back to stressing the nature of the new food system that we're building right now, you and I, is a decentralized one where, yeah, we take big hits. Before, they were hits anticipated because of the climate changes that we're experiencing. But now it's fair to say that there will be hits to, nanny state coming in and saying this has to be shut down or whatever it is. And yeah, I think that's all of this underscores the need to have as many people growing as possible. That's the decentralized model. And it's just more robust that way. Go ahead.
Well, you're talking about the decentralized model. I want to come back to Libya for a second, because Libya's suddenly spotted up and popped up in the news once again. They had the irrigation canals fully functional. They were irrigating the desert out there. And now with the new rainfall patterns that are emerging, that's why there's so many locusts across the Middle East. And you go back in time, you see these areas that are dry desert now were called the Fertile Crescent. The Harappan civilization in Western India, Baghdad, and when you go back in time, taking a look at some of these areas around Mesopotamia, these were milk and honey lands. Today, they're dry stones and sand. But now the rainfall's coming back, and the amount of grass growing, they haven't seen this in centuries, the amount of vegetation returning here, at least 1 century, going back, I would say, to early 1910 or 11, so a little more than a century, talking about how much vegetation's come. But even some other accounts are, this is, multi-century event of how much new rain has come above ground. Now, if you could couple that with what is coming from below ground and put out a massive canal system through North Africa with Libya's water sources, see, then we could talk about shifting a grow zone somewhere. And, regions are going to be shifting here. So just because Canada might have food or might not, and we in the United States might have food or not, there's going to be significant losses in every country, and the exports are going to be cutting off. So the more regional you can get and the more local you can get to try to buffer yourself. And at what point do you overproduce, where then you can start to trade significantly with others? And again, we're going to come back into this time of laws and time of regulations, where if you have too much, now you need to register as a business. You need to get a phytosanitary certificate and have different food and safety storage things, because you have more than a ton of cabbage that you're going to be trading with the next county or the next city over. Our own networks are going to get very large of self-sufficiency and self-production here. We're going to definitely dent into the supermarkets and the whole supply chain and the tax base of buying in supermarkets, which I think it's ridiculous that they charge you tax on food. It's almost criminal that they should do such a thing. But we're going to be rolling into this. So this is a whole nother contention here. As things are shifting greatly on the continental scale of new grow zones, or even, bringing back down into your own large production, cutting into and everywhere in between. But again, they're going to try to, throw these ace cards down. You got too many, you need to register. So again, what point do you start to say, no, this is our food and we don't need a certificate to hold on to our own food that we all grew, regardless of the amount of it? They do this to the co-ops too. You've done a ton of stories on that with co-ops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a conversation to be had here around trying to align with your sheriff and just saying, look, we need law enforcement to be involved in the food security of our community. And there have been conversations around, Second Amendment issues where sheriffs, constitutional sheriffs, will just say we're not going to be able to enforce any of those. If this happens, we won't be enforcing those orders here, and we will in fact protect our people from these things. In fact, there was just a jurisdiction, I forget where, but they did a similar thing with vaccines, saying like it is a human right to be able to have sovereignty over what goes in your body, and we will not be ever doing mandatory vaccines, and any attempt to impose this on our populace will be looked at as an infringement. And invasion. And so, yeah, I think I'm not usually first to suggest political solutions, but perhaps there is. This is why I say that everyone has to be involved, that this is it, that it's go time. And if you're involved in politics, or if you know people that are, or that's just the language you speak, then there's the opportunity for you to get involved and make sure that we are pointing those people in the direction of what's going on and getting them on, like I said, get them on the team, make sure that the sheriffs are on board and getting ready for these things that are coming.
Yeah, again, the shift that's occurring right now, the opportunity, you might even be laughing going, oh, well, you used to be a consultant, you used to, you're running for small town, this or that. But that network of people that know that do have, are able to organize others into security, delivery, and these types of things. Don't underestimate that, and how willing people are to maybe bend now, because before they had to kowtow specifically. And I was going to laugh and say, well, Christian, you're not welcome in the new world order because you care about people. And again, a lot of these people were trying to climb career ladders because they had to, but once they start to realize that the career ladder has just suddenly ended at the last rung, there's no more to go, because there's the entire way offices are going to be structured and back to work and working from home. The entire landscape of business is, you just seen the change beginning. We're at the beginning of the change here. So a lot of these people might not behave like they used to just because you know a person or think they were like that before. It's because they obviously there was an agenda behind their actions to try to move forward in our world. But since our world has definitely shifted, now perhaps these people might think differently, and instead of having to agree with everything, they're going to go off and finally get some of their own opinions. So with the political end, please don't make the mistake of thinking all politicians are slimy and don't want to include them and that they're not part of the solution. They're all scoundrels and things. And we could do that with a lot of different segments through the society and job occupations, right? So what I'm trying to say is don't just judge the book by its previous cover, because everything is so changed right now that people can morph into butterflies in seconds in the way people perceive reality. And before, maybe they were a little selfish, but now suddenly they want to share and help and do because they realize the gravity of the situation. Like where we are now is definitely shifting minds and awareness of truly the control structure on the planet, including the economy and the way the political system was set up and how facade-ish it was. And then just in daily life, like maybe they realize that they're much more content to being outside and doing other things than stuck in an office. Like people have changed so quickly during this time. It's fascinating how fast everybody is just kind of becoming themselves, and just they have all the free time to do what they really want. And just this gigantic emergence of people following sort of passion or just dumping what really made them unhappy in terms of office and work. So look for the change. That's what I'm saying. Just completely be open to everything out there right now in this time of change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I mean when I say the rules that used to apply are no longer entirely there. And you're exact. I like the way you said it, that people are morphing into butterflies really rapidly like that. I like to think of it that way. But you're right. They were optimizing their lives before for certain things. They perceived that dollars had value, and now we see that we're just bailing out everybody, printing as many dollars. So it's people are getting it. The things are breaking down, and so they can actually go do things that they want to do, go do things that feel good to do. And one of the things that is best in terms of keeping this in mind and remembering this to keep the faith and to get hope from it is that just stepping back and looking at the situation and noticing that these people that are trying to control everything have terminator seeds that don't reproduce. They have GMO that's toxic. They have fake news that's full of lies. I mean, they are everything that is about death and lies, and we are fighting that from the side of life, and we are working with nature to grow food, and we're basically doing God's work on this planet right now. We're holding the truth and trying to grow good nutritive food, working with nature. And so of course we're going to win. That's just the way it's got to be. We must win against the forces of evil and darkness. I just think it's a nice framing. What do you think, David?
Well, I think that's already baked into the cycles anyway. I mean, what we talk about with this grand solar minimum cycle on the 400-year period, there's also the Vedic traditions on their wheel as well that are going around 12,500 year intervals as we come out of this Kali Yuga into the Dwapara Yuga or Dwapara. And it's all about the evolution. And they actually talk about the sun changing a phase state where there's just the energy radiance coming out of it in terms of vibration frequency is something different that affects the entire solar system and everything existing, and even outside that, connecting to other solar systems at this time. And it's in a cycle. And what we're seeing right now, I think, is the vestiges of the last of the darkness. They're the ancient evil, as Craig called it, to still try to hold state in this vibration frequency, because we're talking about a state change, because you're noticing it in a lot of people around here too. Things are manifesting faster. People connecting together just seems to be quirky, that it just happens much faster now. In this time of duress, it seems like networks are becoming more cohesive, faster, and people are finding each other. It's almost like electric molecules or atoms being drawn to each other. And as we look at this pyramidal top-down structure in the facade of the Bank for International Settlements and International Monetary Fund, and then the Fed here, it seems that it's all there. They can't hold state, so they're doing anything they can to grab you and try to pull you back down. But the cycles and change in vibration, higher and lower, it's baked in already. So we are going upward every single day. And you can see the struggle. You can really see the division now, where the darkness lies within all this one segment of population that wants to control everybody. It's so visible now. And I think that's part of the reason people are waking up and really wanting to take a different look at how their lives have been structured, and possibility to take sovereignty and grow food and have their own fresh water and collect their rainwater for once without being arrested in some states. Can't even collect your rainwater without being arrested. That's crazy. So there's really a division now. It's very opaque, and it's starting to like separate, like oil and water, where you see the darkness over there and you see more vibrational light on this side. Vast changes coming through. So how many cycles within the cycle in the cycle do you think we are? Because I think we're in a more heavy or powerful cycle on this time, riding inside this 11 and 400 year duration. But the cycles and the time say there might be something heavier out there, and even on top of that. Don't know what you think.
I think it is truly an exceptional time. And I agree that they seem to be grasping as best they can. And I like to think that humanity, that we are a species that when you try and do that, that we wriggle free, right? We just sort of respond by getting even more difficult to grasp. And you see, like one discouraging thing that I heard was somebody who, I guess you would say this person is not quite as aware as I would like them to be. And a couple of weeks ago they were saying, there's never going to be this ID of vaccination. They're never going to inject. That's ridiculous, right? They were still on the that's ridiculous side of things. And then mere days later, they were saying, it's just like the TSA after 9/11, man. We'll just adapt and we'll get over it. And for one thing, that was just, I just have to observe that was a really scary shift to such an extreme thing. We all have to be digitally ID'd, and it's just accept it, But I think that's the risk here, is that we have been gradually, incrementally pushed towards this totalitarian system for a while now, and people have gotten used to the creeping totalitarianism, and they've gotten used to adapting to it. And I think what's going on now is a fatal dose of it. I think that we can't accept this latest rounds of changes. We have to push back. We can't allow them to completely control the food system and have IDs and all of us walking around. It's just the current round of things that they're trying to push through, and that they're going to use the coming food shortages to really ramp up the pain and try and make the case for their agenda, is not something that we can allow. It's just not.
Yeah, I'm seeing triple ones and triple twos. It's the numerology everywhere. But also, check out Emirates Airlines. You're going to be baffled. You're going to be shocked. You're going to fall off your chair over, and you're going to be like, no way, because it dovetails right into what you said, Christian. Emirates Airlines, if you're going to fly from in the Middle East, and they were flying specifically Tunisia, I think they were going from Abu Dhabi or Dubai to Tunisia. They had a couple different routes they were doing this. Before you were able to board the aircraft, they had 6 seats, and they had to prick your finger, and then they took blood before you were able to get on the aircraft, 6 people at a time. So now they were telling their citizens, well, you got to go to the airport like 4 hours, 5 hours early now, because you're going to have to get a blood test before you can get on the plane to be able to go to Middle East. It wasn't, Dubai over to London or Dubai over to Sydney. It was Dubai to Tunisia, within the same continental region there. So if they're already at the point where they're taking blood in the airport before you can get in, and they did it at the boarding gate because everybody's sitting around there. So they just came around, all right, your turn, your turn, your turn. How many people are going to say no? Before you say, no, I'm not going to give you my blood so I can get on the airplane. You're you're smoking something at that point. And you know, how well trained are the people, and where's your DNA going to go? There's a million other things with it, but just the principal point is they need to take in, you need to give blood before you can get on an airplane. I mean, we've already jumped the shark on that one.
Yeah, it's out of control. And you saw the media at the beginning even of this virus craze starting to say people that aren't vaccinated shouldn't even be allowed to fly. So, I mean, you're right. We're going to experience a ramping up of this kind of stuff. And they're going to make the case that we all need to be, you know, we were just saying that we'll all need to be vaccinated and ID'd and show our tattoo like an idiocracy. But and then seeds, the food is the weapon that's going to make that go through. And I just want to point out, like Bill Gates, who's up there pushing a lot of this stuff through, and plenty of people are already talking about him. But one thing that's not being mentioned as much is that he was a heavy financer of the Svalbard seed vault. He's very involved in collecting and protecting seed genetics. And so as they're doing that privately, but then outlawing seed sales, like it's clear what's going on there. Like we need to, that's true wealth, and we need to start accumulating seeds. Those genetics are what can feed us and our families going forward in the future. And then growing them out, making more and more of them, proving them out in our local environments, sharing those results with our communities. When you see them spending tens of millions of dollars to build this seed vault, and trying to deprive you of seeds, if you didn't already value them, now it should be pretty clear that that's a valuable thing, that's true wealth.
Yeah, shout out to Southwest Utah, creating a food forest in the desert, because Craig lives down that way, and I know a fair handful of people that are living down in the Four Corners area that are saying that it's becoming incredibly wet and there's so much more vegetation growing that here's just an idea for you. Personal, firsthand, you know, this is what they're doing. They're going around and finding the edible plants, and there seem to be a fair few types. Even they have a bean that grows off that can be made flour, and I forget the name of it. And there's an enormous amount of desert plants that are growing. So what they're doing is they're finding where the plants are outside their homes and outside their neighborhoods, out in the wild, or in, again, just around where they're living. And what they're doing is then cutting away the other brush, or creating an environment for that food plant to then expand in its natural environment. Because if it's growing there, that seed rolled and it chose to put roots in, and it lives there really well. So it's already chose the best, most perfect location for it to thrive and exist in nature anyway. That's why the plant's there. That's the sweet spot, literally, for that plant to be growing. So just think about creating an area, or, you know, knocking away some other vegetation that's around there so things can expand. Now, I know cactus grow pretty slow, and different varieties of acacia grow pretty slow, but there's other faster growing plants that are out there that also provide berries that can be crushed into wheat, or different fruits and that sort of thing. Leafy, well, I wouldn't say leafy, but a much harder vegetable. You have to boil for 20 minutes to eat it. But there's other things out there. And if you clear that, and, you know, you can do the same thing in a regular forest around your house if you're more in the northern parts of the US, but all the way from deserts in Utah, clear up to the open plains, and all the way up into the forests of Maine, you can do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And a food forest is like, it's not something that's just, here's the way you do it, go execute on this plan. It's like, what's working for you in your area? What have other people done in similar zones, given your precipitation patterns? You obviously, you want to go out there and put some perennial nitrogen fixers in there. I was just looking at some Siberian pea right now, because it's, I mean, those are your powerhouses. They come in and they just, year after year, that's all they do, is they exist to draw down nitrogen and to feed everything around them. And so you put those guys in there, and then whether you're doing annuals or whatever else, fruit trees all around them to benefit from those nitrogen fixing plants. That's just, it's awesome. You build these systems that take a, you know, a little bit of invested labor at first, but over time they pay off so much more. And those are the systems we need to be standing up right now, because you know, we got to be doing, it's like we've been saying all along, you got to be doing that work up front to get those results later.
And I might toss out there goji berries, which are the red ones that you see frequently in the store that are dehydrated. Those grow really well into just incredible bushy bushes that you get huge yields off of. But the berries are small. It takes a little time to harvest. But again, it's a never-ending plant. Once you put it in the ground, it keeps going. And also gooseberries, which when they grow, they come to a yellow round berry. And they're really full of seeds, but they're quite delicious. I've been dehydrating a few of those. just one berry is enough to put out. You got to start them in a tray. I do. And then both of the goji, because there's a lot of seeds in a goji berry. So be careful not to put them all in one thing, because you got 8 to 10 seedlings coming out of one little thing, and they're hard to split apart without breaking them and causing damage. But same with the gooseberries. There's an enormous amount of seeds in just one of them. You only need literally one berry to just put it out, and you could grow dozens of plants from that one. But these are super nutrient foods that I would think would be quite helpful to have around. They grow faster. Again, even if they die over winter, what it appears they're still alive underground, they'll pop back up the next spring come time.
And just to drive that home, go get some goji berries, go get an organic spaghetti squash, go get some of the organic potatoes, because the inorganic ones have been sprayed with stuff that keeps them from growing eyes. And then, yeah, do it. Get the seeds out of the berries, start more than you can take. And then over the next however many months, because the nurseries have shut down, in a lot of cases, there's no other way for people to get to these things anymore. So if you want your community to have access to these kinds of foods, it's up to us. It's up to those of us who are aware, who see what's going on, to start those seeds now and be able to equip our community to deal with what's happening as they figure it out. But yeah, gooseberries, those things are sharp. You got to watch out. Those are like we're talking about the permaculture security perimeter there. They serve multiple functions. You can get those with the blackberries. It's a good deal.
Yeah, and I forgot my train of thought there. Was going to play off, but go ahead. Couldn't remember what I was going to say. Forget it. I lost my chance.
The sharp gooseberries are always a derailer.
Yeah,
there.
It was something prior to that, but all right. I'll think about it. It'll come back to me like, oh, that's what it was.
Yeah, so I mean, go get those squash, the organic butternut squash, organic spaghetti squash. These are good ones to just scoop those seeds out, dry them out, and then you've got an army. And you can save those. Obviously, you can save those seeds, and you've got something. They're not going to grow as well as they will next year, right? Once you grow them in your own environment, and they sort of learn where you are and how much you water them. I'll say more on the food forest, because I've been working hard on like a lot of trees. You'll need to irrigate, and irrigation takes power. Water is pretty expensive as a resource for me here. I'm not in a place where it just rains all year long in California. So when I look at the food forest design that I'm working on, it's involving a lot of trees that are drought tolerant. So I've got irrigation now because they're all very, they're still getting established. But the goal is like looking 2-3 years down the line, I can pull the irrigation. I can even pull the fencing down, and those trees will just continue, just like figs, persimmons, pomegranates, olives. These are trees that once they get over that initial establishing phase, that's it. They just, I say you can't print food, but that's about as close as you can get. Once you establish a drought tolerant tree, you don't need to irrigate it or worry about it at all. If you give it some horse manure a couple times a year, that would probably be exactly what it wants. And then you're printing food.
Yeah, and that was the point I was trying to bring up there is, you go into the garden centers that you were talking about. When you're going to buy a tomato plant that's ready to put in the ground, those are $7. I mean, how long would it take before you need 10 plants? That's almost $100 after tax, and I only put 10 plants in, where you could grow those from seed. And, just the movement of these garden centers. And, how about a fruit map or a food map of your neighborhood? Because I would have mapped out your house and said, hey, there's this house over there that has a whole bunch of fruit trees in it. And I would have put you on a map and said, there's fruit at this place. And then, in Taipei or outside of it, where I was living over in Taiwan before I came back to the US here, we had a whole map of like all these community gardens all over, a couple square miles. There must have been 25 community gardens there, with areas where water catchment was, where there were a couple basins that when it rained, they would fill up as a lake, and then it was slowly drained down if there was. And so anywhere there was food or water, just made a map about it. And, before long, you have a full map and you know exactly where everything is around. But yeah, your house would have for sure been marked as a fruit zone. So just think about that. If you're going to go around the neighborhood, how much have you really paid attention to what trees, what type of vegetation is growing in your local neighborhood? I know a lot of it is ornamentals, but have you really taken a look at people's plants as you're walking around? Have you really started to notice after the flowering, is that just a beautiful flower that's coming out for spring, or is that going to actually turn into a fruit? And what type of trees do you know, like the identification of different species? So if you walk by it, even before it bears fruit, that you still know that could be a tree, like a fig, they have a specific leaf on that, very easy to spot. So, how about a food beyond the food forest itself? What about food maps of the local, growing, or even how about a local map of the distributors, the wholesalers, the farmers markets, and the actual farms that are around your area too. Anything to do with food. How about the rail destinations where large amounts of cargo come in, specifically, break bark on wheat coming across on a train. So, you could take it large or small. Again, you could do that continentally down to local, or, from the train depot all the way just to, there's a couple plants, a couple papaya trees down in that tree line over there.
Yeah, and expanding on that, any resource, right? So if you're driving down your neighborhood and you see somebody's got horses, then like I said, there's a great source for, I think, plenty of it, of horse manure for your fruit trees. And somebody next door has alpacas. You've got some alpaca wool, and everybody's hurting right now in their own ways. And so it's you get a different, like Dave was saying, you get a different answer now if you ask, hey, can I come take some of your horse crap, or can I help you with this, or can we trade this or that? It's just to really underscore the financial aspect and the economic impact of what's going on right now, because there's so much changing so rapidly that it is almost impossible to really crystallize all of it simultaneously into like a new, and like I said, it's every day you're still looking for that solid ground to stand on. And part of those things that have changed is just how severely our economic situation has been damaged right now. And what that means is that people are looking for new opportunity. There are new opportunities. People are doing things they wouldn't have done before. They're exploring options they weren't thinking about before, and they're making transitions into growing food and doing things that they didn't have time for before. So it's just try things. I think that's a great thing, is do experiments in your garden, but also socially. Who can I work with in my neighborhood here to build that map of horse manure and fruit trees and all of these resources that we can really capitalize on as a community together. Always, you got to start, of course, with your family and trying to make sure you're secure there. But it's not enough, folks. You can't just stock up and beans, band-aids, and bullets your way through this. It's going to take the people around you working with you. And so that's a conversation you have to start now.
And I made the mistake too. I've grown chard a lot, but this time I put black plastic on it because they were expecting a freeze. I forgot to take it off. I got around noon, and then the plastic had heated so much from the UV, and it just completely fried everything that the plastic was covering. I got to start over and replant again. That's the first time it's happened to me. I usually use clear plastic, had black plastic, didn't think anything of it. And that's a major mistake, because if that would have been the crop for the year, that would be something and a mistake that would put you in danger. So make the mistakes now while you still got a little time to more replant. At least for the rest of the year, you can probably replant twice depending on your zone. And also, Christian, quick question about dehydrators. Food dehydrators, they're quite expensive. Some of them 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. You can even take it to 10 grand for a food dehydrator or freeze dryer, and these mechanical systems to keep our foods and preserve them for a longer period of time. What are you thinking in ways that people can store food with either dehydration or freeze drying that won't break the bank?
Yeah, so the good news is that people for thousands of years have practiced many different ways of preserving their food. There's a couple, even if you go to archive.org and look for preservation and preserving food, you can find texts from hundreds of years ago that describe all sorts of ways. And it's good news. The more you look into this, the more comforted you are. There have been tins of lard that have been, like 60 years old that weren't frozen. Like, all the things you read about lard going bad if you don't have it in the freezer after a year. They found this tin of lard from like World War II, and they open it up and it's fine. So when you combine like the fact that flour doesn't store well, but grains do, you can just put some hard red wheat, especially, stores pretty well if you keep it dry and put oxygen absorbers in there. So that's great. That means we have lard, which is pretty stable. We've got wheat that's pretty stable. We can combine those to make tortillas or any number of things. And it sounds weird to say this, but actually cooking is one of the skills that I think is most important for us right now, because that is how you translate these raw ingredients into good nutritive food that you want to eat, right? If it doesn't taste good, we've already got a problem there. But I don't think anybody wants to look at like 5 years of just gruel and oatmeal and stuff like that. So figuring out how to take stored food and translating that into how to work with it. These are things actually we should already be practicing. Cooking with your own preps is something I've talked about before on my own channel. But yeah, having that understanding of like, these are the raw things that I'm able to store. This is what I'm able to grow. This is what I can trade for. Collectively, I can render these into a pretty diverse, good tasting diet. Even my kids will eat it, right? It's the more you flex that muscle, I think the easier this whole thing gets and the more approachable the problem becomes.
Yeah, think about it called scratch cooking, because we're making everything from scratch again. And what kind of iron, skillets do you have around? Is if you can make the bread or the dough, you can put that in the skillet and then be able to put it in the oven, and then vegetables go in and a pot pie comes out later. But scratch cooking, go back to, I'm sure your grandma or some of your older relatives have cookbooks laying around. It's not, there's a million cookbooks around everywhere. And if you can find the older cookbooks that have recipes from the 1880s coming up to say mid 1930s, that whole set of cooking is very different than, ingredients they're putting together today. I mean, that was some serious home cooking, like the meat with the, when you're talking about the lards and butters and these kind of things for the real hearty, like super thick, hearty foods for people working on farms, people working a full day's work. At that time, that's what it was all about, is having that calorie build. So if you can get the proteins, the fats, and the calories all kind of as a one package, the older cookbooks seem to have that, secret recipe for keeping your body moving, doing heavy labor the whole entire day out in the farm or building a barn or any of these types of other things that we used to do when we didn't have such either robotics or machinery. It was a lot more human labor involved. So the cooking at that time reflected that for the body's use of needing much more power for a longer period of time compared to eating a crepe with some organic blueberry syrup on it, and that whoosh, it's gone after 2 hours and you're hungry again, versus eating a massive, deep, thick, turkey pot pie or chicken pot pie or something.
Yeah, and someone in the chat just mentioned pemmican, which is actually
Oh,
a
that's a
great
great one,
example,
like that
great
stuff.
example of exactly what you're talking about. And you see that too when you look back, like people used to use lard, people used to, it wasn't just cooking things that, foodies just cook what tastes good, and that's like the whole deal for them. But when you look back, a lot of these things like the pemmican was created because it stored so well, because that's like the original keto, right? It's like just a fat protein bomb in pemmican. And so you take that on the trail or out when you're working the fields, and yeah, you've got that in your pocket for your midday snack and get you through the rest of the day. A lot of good healthy fats in there.
Yeah, and if you want to learn how to make pemmican, you can go look at, there's a fair few channels on YouTube that talk about Civil War reenactment, or, wars later on in their Civil War reenactment. Those are the pemmican. You'll find some cookbooks of a Civil War cookbook. There's a whole channel on that, Civil War cookbook. And that's all they do is replicate channels or replicate recipes passed down that they could find in archives from that era, from say 1750 to 1800, in that whole era, and the change in the Revolutionary War that culminated in 76. So there's even channels devoted to that, and that they have full pemmican recipes on there too, especially if you can get the blueberries to go along with it. And everything's at your fingertips, and use technology at the moment. I mean, if you don't know how to cook something, you can just simply download a PDF on how to do the recipes. There is so much information at our fingertips right now. I actually think I should be more voracious in downloading and saving information than I am right now.
I wholly agree for myself as well. Yeah, because at some point, I mean, that's again, when we see the trajectory that these things are moving, that resources for self-sufficiency are being removed and or criminalized. And so, yeah, download away, get that stuff offline. Um, but yeah, a lot of good other suggestions. Salting meat, smoking meat, some good stuff in the chat.
Yeah, there's a certain ratio for the salt to the meat as well. I've seen a couple different ratios. And how many of you have gone out and bought 30, 40, 50 pounds of salt during this time? Costco and different kind of Sam's Club and thing, they have huge, gigantic things of salt, either, Himalayan salt that's just ground up in a huge, giant 5-pound jar or glass or plastic container. And there's sea salt that does the same thing. And then you got the baking soda that comes in the 15-pound bags. Like, how many of you have 45, 50, 60 pounds of baking soda? I mean, these are the things that can be used for medicine. And, there's a lot of crossover here on honey. Honey's been used traditionally, as long as you get the raw honey, don't get the processed honey, get the raw honey, make sure the raw honey on that thing, and buy gallons and gallons and gallons of it. I mean, most people are running for the cans of beans, but what about the 5-pound thing of salt? If you're going to do salting in anything, you're even going to need it for brine mixes. If you're going to do some canning without pressure, if you're just going to do, the 10-minute heating to save vegetables, you're still going to need the salt for brine. So Salt, 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 and more salt would be a good thing, because eventually you're going to actually be able to trade that, in my personal opinion. Now, you might think we might not go down that far down the rabbit hole, but it's not about the collapse of the total economy or evaporation. It's about the barter system starts up again. And then people who have the meat go, gee, I don't have any salt. I know that guy up the street has some salt. Maybe we could trade him something. So it's not about a full collapse before you're going to utilize this, like down to Mad Max type, but it's going to evolve into something much quicker than that. And I really think we're going to go to a much more of a barter economy before we, start taking the hit so much with the green pieces of paper that are going to devalue by the day.
Rapidly. Yeah, very rapidly. And you're right. I'll be seeing you on that black market for salt. But no, I mean, it's entirely possible. And I think there will only be it's a few things that I would call out as like it's absolutely sure that those things are going to be there in the future. And that's like the fake meat, the lab grown meat. They're obviously pushing really hard on that. Even right now, those companies are getting financed to the tune of millions of dollars. So I don't expect to ever see a lab grown meat shortage. I think we'll see a lot of that being reintroduced, as we already saw the Whopper pretty recently. But I wanted to actually mention something that I recently talked on my channel the other day to Gabe Brown, who's like a regenerative rancher, one of the forefathers of those kinds of good soil husbandry practices. And one of the things he said to me that stuck with me was that we all need to find our superpower and then really milk it. Whatever it is that he was talking about, whatever it is that you can grow really easily where you are, that might be a cash crop or whatever, do it. Like find it and then milk it for all it's worth. And then you can find other things, do the experimentation, find other streams of income, other things that will work well, and invest the proceeds back into your operation from that first thing. But he said that, and it stuck with me because I think it resonates also for the broader situation here. When we say whatever your experience is, if you're the webmaster that can now help the rancher next door find his path back direct to market, if you can give him a shopping cart so he can move his product, or whatever your unique skill set is, find that superpower and then really milk it and use it to empower the people around you and work with them so that we are building a future here.
I listened to that interview. You were doing it live streaming with him as well. And I had a chance to tune in for about an hour when I was working on something else, because I make it my prerogative also to listen to other people to try to get a landscape view of what's happening with so many facets. So when I'm doing other things, I'm listening. I might not watch the video, but I listen to it in the background. And what I found really interesting also was he's saying they don't use, what was that, insecticides anymore, because for every one negative pest, there's like 71 good ones. And they were trying to encourage with the flowers and the different kind of plants that they were growing, and companion planting and all these other things with the forests around, to encourage all these massive, huge, gigantic amounts of positive insects to overwhelm the pests. Instead of killing them all using insecticides, you might have one pest. You might want to learn how to deal with it, because you mentioned planting potatoes in the beginning. I've tried to plant potatoes in containers just like you did with the grow bags, and ours always got moldy. I mean, they do okay in buckets, not grow bags, and sometimes it's hit or miss in the soil. But I didn't know about neem oil, so I'm always continuously learning on, natural plantings and defense for this thing, but keeping the insect population up and just the simple, neem oils. And there's a plethora of things. Oh my gosh, there's so much to even learn how to get the basics of the food to keep it without using insecticides, herbicides, or something like this on top of the plants. So we might even have to start, thinking how to produce our own fertilizers from algae. Because if you have a pond, this is just a quick secret here. If you have a freshwater pond down the street from you and it slicks over with algae, go take that algae and pull it out of the pond and use that as your super fertilizer. I swear your plants will grow like they've never grown before. And that, pond scum algae is everywhere. And try to get it when it's more green if you can, before it breaks down in the oil. The cells will break, and then the oil, and that's why you start to get that yellow gunk that's on the top, and it boils, and that's the decomposition. You're getting the methane decomposition from the algae cells that broke down. They're now decomposing. So if you can get it before that stage when it's green in the water, throw some hooks or figure out a net or whatever, bring it all up, let it all dry out, chop it up, or some kind of way that you can fluff it or whatnot, and then go put that around the base of your plants. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. Every single pond across the US during the summertime gets algae on it. There's a free source of super incredible, unbelievable, high-powered fertilizer that'll take you to the next level farming for free out of a pond if you go get it.
Yeah, that's the problem is the solution. So it's not an annoying pond scum. It's actually our naturally occurring fertilizer here that we can take and leverage. Yeah, and one of the other things, you're right, Gabe Brown also mentioned that his operation is completely without inputs from off the farm. So it's completely self-sufficient. All the animal agriculture, he's raising livestock, chickens, and then they've got a farm as well. And so all of this nutrient cycling happens within his farm. And you know, as a lot of people, especially in larger farming corporate operations right now, wouldn't believe that that's even possible at this point. They think, you know, you get the seeds from the seed company and the fertilizers from over there and the herbicide, the, you know, pesticides, and how else would you do it? And so, right, this ties back to what we said. There's a huge need for education right now, and we need to get these regenerative principles out there, because that's this the way that things that food has been grown recently, very recently in human history terms, feeds in to the dependence on the chemical, so on the petrochemical state, right? This is why the Rockefellers paid so much money to establish the USDA and start exporting petrochemical agriculture to the rest of the world, so that they could push everyone further onto dependence, right? It's the same slide into dependence and totalitarianism, but it's just further down a timeline.
And a little bit of money saving advice here. If you're going to purchase seeds, now you can go into a store and you can get the packs and you can get 5 or 10 of those for $1, depending on which place you go for $1. It's much more cost efficient to go and get the wholesale seeds by the pound. And there's an enormous amount of sites, you know, Johnny Seeds, True Leaf Market, West Coast Seeds, and I'm sure I'm missing quite a few out there. But buying bulk seed, you're going to save just so much. You're going to get so much seed. You're going to be, I can't even believe I wasted the money to ever buy those packs in the beginning, because a lot of people are going to go for the first time are going to go for those packs that if sometimes they're even $2, $3 each to get a pack of seeds, one little pack. But if you're ordering an entire pound or a 5-pound bag, you're getting hundreds of thousands of seeds, depending on the size, or 50,000, 20,000 seeds in that pound, or 2 pounds, 5 pounds. So it's much more cost efficient. It'll be $10, $15 for that huge bag, but you're going to get, you know, just mere grams of it if you buy it in those little small pouches that you see for sale. So think about optimizing your dollars to get more seed out of it, but there is going to be a small delay, because almost everywhere across the landscape now it's 2 to 3 weeks delay in shipping, depending on what seed company you're using. But go the bulk seeds, save yourself the trouble and save yourself some money and get an enormous amount of seed out of that same dollar value.
And if you're starting, great point. And if you're starting a new area, if you're trying to, you know, take some nasty clay or whatever it is actually, and then develop that into good usable soil, one that's absolutely critical to have on hand would be a good bulk bag of daikon radish, because that stuff is just amazing at breaking through a hard pan and establishing, and then it provides some shade, and then you can just chop and drop. Matt Powers, actually the permaculture student author, just did a video the other day of the way he's setting up. You know, he just got a new spot and he's setting up new gardens, and that was one of the ways he did. It's one of the ways I've done it as well, is just because nothing else was growing for me except for the daikons, so I let them grow, and that meant that there was shade then, and they sort of held the moisture down there, and it turned this nasty clay into soil that's now growing other things as well. But that was sort of the pioneer. I had to have someone go in and secure the soil there. And daikon, so daikon absolutely just something that I would recommend, and they're delicious too. But as far as like a garden utility, a soil building cover crop, definitely one to have on hand.
Yeah, and you could go again online to look at much more information about which kind of crops are going to fix the nitrogen, which types of beans. I've decided to go with the bush beans out back there along the fence line, at least for about 40 feet of just pure bush beans, 2 deep, just to see how many we can get out of that. And then on the other side with peas coming up on the poles, and just trying to get a ratio of something else. I got the flax. And by the way, I found that out of everything I've grown this year or trying to grow, besides doing the microgreens, and everything's amazing with the microgreens, you know, they're always at a steady after about a week and a half. You're going to get a crop out of microgreens. If you want to use the seed, if you're not going to plant the seed, if you have an enormous amount of seed, you got 100 pounds of seed, of course, do microgreens with that for a while to get. But I found this year, flax seemed to be growing so fast, far above anything, just in the buckwheat as well. These two for me, the buckwheat draws It's a white flower. It draws in an enormous amount of pollinators. And at the same time, you get a grain out of it. Now, again, you're going to have to switch your dietary idea. Now, how much buckwheat will I get? Probably 100 pounds. But changing your ideas about what's an edible grain versus it's always been wheat, it's always been rice for some, it's been corn. Well, when's the last time that you had a buckwheat biscuit or you had something made out of buckwheat porridge? Probably none of you out there can think of really the last time you had a buckwheat something or other, except a very small percentage. So flax, buckwheat, millet, amaranth you mentioned, and what was another? You had something else that grew prolifically that had an enormous amount of seed. So just experiment. So I'm giving my personal thing. Southeast US flax is off the hook with the buckwheat. Unbelievable so far.
Very nice. Yeah, amaranth and quinoa was the other one.
Quinoa, the other one, yeah.
So many seeds, literally thousands of seeds those things throw out, and then you can give packets, bulk packets, to all of your neighbors, and then they're on the team. Then they're growing grains right next door to you. Those are also grains that you can feed to your chickens, and so it's good. There's a lot of they also have a lot of, they just drop a lot of organic matter that you can sort of mulch with or do whatever. So yeah, so I've got a lot of the amaranth growing this year, and a lot of what's it called, sorghum, because it just worked really well here. I'm looking for my superpowers, and sorghum, lo and behold, if you go look at growing more vegetables, John Jeevan's book, he's got a table organized by caloric output of your crop per irrigation requirement, right? You can break it down by any number of constraints, and as I mentioned earlier, water's very expensive for me, and so that's one of my main constraints. And so when I saw that chart saying actually sorghum is right there at the top of how many calories you can eke out by a long shot per drop of water that you irrigate, I said that's great. We can maybe try and process that into sorghum syrup. Definitely my chickens love the grains, and so I've got some more of that growing. We'll stick with what works. Also, habanero peppers is one that did really well for me. It's like not exactly something I can feed to my my toddler, but maybe I can trade it for that, or make dried, actually capsaicin, right? The capsicum powder it's great for clearing up congestion, so it's a medicinal thing in there. There's medicinal qualities is there. Whatever it is, and whatever, as unhelpful as it may seem to you, if that's your superpower, if you can eke out crickets in your closet or on top of your RV, whatever it is that you can do, there's a need for it right now. It may seem insignificant and like you just can't make a difference, but I promise you, you do what you can do in the space you have with the constraints you have, and then again look at your experiences and your expertise and see how you can push this forward for all of us.
Yeah, and the crickets as well. It wouldn't be for you or I to eat. And I'm not down with the insect protein. Although in Asia, it's a normal thing. People eat insect protein all the time. But the cricket's more for the small animals or the chickens or something.
I fired my insect farm up again. I did crickets last time, and there was a video of eating them with some nice garlic powder. It wasn't that bad, but yeah, it wouldn't be a mainstay for me probably. But this time I went with mealworms because they're nowhere near as loud. I was pretty tired towards the end of the cricket farming of the constant, and so is my wife, of the constant noise. So yeah, mealworms are much quieter, and they're working well. They're multiplying as we speak, and the chickens love those too. So yeah, looking for ways to get the chickens protein. I can grow, like I said, I can grow some of the grains for the chickens, but they'll still need to have some protein supplements, and so that's what the mealworms are for.
So really, that makes me laugh that your cricket farm was too loud for you. For me, the sound of crickets reminds me of like warm, sunny days, out camping, campfires. I love the sound of crickets because it always brings really happy memories of like sunshine and warmth in summertime. I'm just thinking about on the river, camping, campfire, those sunny stars, lightning bugs out in the forest. And you're saying crickets are too loud. I'm thinking, could crickets be too loud? I'm not sure, but you're saying that they are.
Well, when you've got like 1,000 of them in your closet, it starts to get pretty loud. Yeah.
You could record that. You could. I want to hear that recording night after night.
If you go back earlier on the Ice Age Farmer channel, most of my videos, you can hear the crickets there in the background. They were there.
Well, yeah. See, the people thought you were out in the forest somewhere. You tricked everybody. They're all like, "Oh, that guy's living in the forest, broadcasting from his house. How cool is that?" But no, dude, it's a loud cricket farm behind me in the closet.
Absolutely. That was when I was still in San Francisco in a tiny shoebox apartment. And that was what I could do. And so I did everything I could do. I did the spirulina, I did the crickets for protein, Spirulina has plenty, you've talked about that before on your channel, plenty of nutrients in there. Doesn't taste to me terribly appetizing, but it is something that you can do in not a lot of room. It does take a lot of inputs, so you constantly have to throw in baking soda and some other stuff. So it's not, I don't know. I stopped farming it myself. I stopped with the spirulina. I stopped with a lot of the stuff that seems like it's cool, or like it's like maybe there's a high tech way forward. The vertical towers, I had some grow towers with the aquaponics, and it worked, but it's just not. It's not at the scale that moves the needle, right? The thing that really feels like it does the best job, and it feeds nutrients back into the whole homestead, and feeds, you know, some of it goes to the chickens, some of it goes over here. It's just the soil, just getting into the soil and growing good things using those soil building principles.
Yeah, so spirulina best consumed with smoothie and apple juice or something with a protein powder. If you're going to eat the spirulina by itself, yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not terrible, but just taking a big spoon of spirulina and mixing it in water with nothing else, you're probably going to find a better taste elsewhere. So always mix it in with something else that has a little bit of sweetness, and you probably won't even notice it other than the color change. And if you do it right, it'll just add like a nice, bright, vivid greenness to it, especially if you're going to make a smoothie, protein smoothie, apple juice, carrot juice, that kind of stuff works really well with the spirulina to mask the taste and help that blend right in. Because it's got a little bit, I wouldn't say musty, but a little bit earthy, pretty earthy, and a little bit on the salty edge too. So blend it in, you can balance the taste out. So you're gonna have to do this with a lot of things. You know, things that we didn't used to eat. Like, I'm not a fan of just eating into a white onion, but I'm starting to get toward like, man, I got to eat more of these onions. I don't like them as well. It's just like training the mind to eat different foods that you maybe didn't like before, like Brussels sprouts. I know people like, hey, you couldn't drag them across broken glass to eat a Brussels sprout on the other side. But you know, these things that we didn't like as foods before, seems like it might be able to, again, as a retrospect of changing the thought of what good foods are, and, you know, adding different tasting berries or fruits or something that might be a little sour. Maybe you don't want to eat I don't know, like a crab apple, for example. Crab apples are huge. You used to make whiskey with that, or, you know, Johnny Appleseed, something like this, making your own hooch from the schnapps. And said that's what that was all about. I shouldn't say whiskey, but using the fruit to ferment and then make your own schnapps at that time. So Johnny Appleseed. So who's eating crab apples? You know, they got a very bizarre taste. Some are sweet, some are sour, some are perfect, some are just like, oh, I can't. It's like eating into a lemon. Like, you know, we can get used to change in diet and taste and flavor profiles. It was so perfect for our society before. Everything was perfectly apportioned with 1/8 of a tablespoon or 1/8 of a teaspoon of this to mellow the flavors. Well, we're going to have to just go back to basics again, I do believe. And a lot of these things that you're expecting out of the stores, don't get me wrong, they'll be there for the next couple months, 2-3 months, but it's slowly trickling down. Everybody I'm talking to is telling me it's one thing that's missing from what they're buying. So that keeps giving me the signal. If one person's telling me, hey, I went out and these things to buy an ice cream cone, and the cone wasn't there, didn't have any cones, you got to put it in a cup. And the next person comes out, hey, there was nothing of this on the shelf, and that disappeared over there. But it always seems to be one of something that they can't find. It's not the full store anymore, but it seems to be one thing that people are always saying, hey, that's not there anymore.
And
So
it's surprising, you know, it's not what you would expect. We've talked about this actually in the past with respect to changing precipitative patterns, and like it's not that primary effect like, oh, I won't have enough water or there'll be too much water. That obviously that did happen. The flooding in the Midwest is a huge deal, but there's these secondary and tertiary effects that you can't even anticipate, like the fact that as a result of the changing rain patterns, there's suddenly 4 trillion locusts devouring the food security of people across the Middle East and Africa. So like no one really could have anticipated that. And so I think you got to keep an eye out for that.
I'm going to say, oh, I disagree on that. I am saying the Vatican, that holds all this information that they've pillaged from the earth over the last 500 years, has the codices, the stelae, the carvings, the stories. And I say they know the entire history of the cycles, of the next cycles that are coming, and everything back hundreds of thousands of years, all the way into the future and the past, based on some of these more advanced I should call them astroarchaeological finds that we find, where they're always focused on the stars in the heavens, and they know the cycles on how the we are even in the spiral arm of a galaxy, and they've mapped that out. Like, there was an enormous amount of things that were consolidated in private libraries and things. I know they know the cycles. And when I say they, I'm talking about governments, central bankers, and some of these planners and elites. They for sure, and religious elites, they for sure know the cycles because they have all the text from the last 500 years. They didn't burn all that and destroy it. Are you kidding me? They brought it back and studied it themselves.
Right, but for those of us who didn't get the PDF download from the Library of Alexandria, we are trying to divine what we see from the data that we do have available. I think we've done, especially in the last decade or so, I think the reconstruction has been really amazing. It's just been awesome to see the internet come together and piece things together, and all these things flowing in, electric universe, all these theories sort of like adding their own piece to the puzzle. But as we try and figure it out, but now it's down to the wire. Now it's a tactical situation, and that's why I'm focusing more on how we respond to this situation, and where we go from here. Yeah.
You know, wonder if libraries will be a little more lax on letting you in once they open back up again to see different things. I wonder if the rules will change. Anyway, so far we're going to wrap it down here. Thanks, Christian, for coming on. It's been a little over an hour. I didn't even notice that until looking at the phone, and I was looking for the download and the PDF of Library of Alexandria. I thought I had it on my phone, but I guess I don't.
Yeah,
But
it's been a pleasure, David. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? Close us out. I like to, just finish this off with something interesting and go deep if you go as deep as you want. I'm curious
Well,
what.
it's been a pleasure. Thank you again for having me on your channel and for doing the live stream. And to the folks in the chat, it's been a pleasure also to be here with you, and an honor. And thanks for your contributions. It was fun to keep us moving on everything. But no, I think we've already said the important bits. I think it's look at, there's so much fear that we need to step back from and really take an appraisal of where we are and all these changes that are happening right now. And it's not something that we can gamble on, the availability of food. And so start with yourself, look at your own experience and what you've done in the past and what you can contribute to the needs of your community right now to try and make the landing a little bit softer. Start growing that food, start saving the seeds. If you've not started already, I think it's abundantly clear by now that that's where the need lies. And it's food that they are using as a weapon, right? It's been talked about for plenty of time. Kissinger mentioned control food, control the people. Lord Birkenhead 100 years ago talked about how they would have the cities feeding the country and invert the whole paradigm. So we're watching them seize on this opportunity. As you said, they've got the maps to the cycles. They knew what was coming, but rather than try and get us through it with the soft landing, they seized the opportunity to take total control. And so now that we've pieced the puzzle together, now that we see them openly just trying to strip seeds away and get rid of front yard gardens, we just have to completely redouble, if not re-triple, our efforts at growing food and get back to the things that humanity has always done to feed ourselves.
And again, it's that mind shift of we don't need them anymore. We can take care of it ourselves. And I think that's what the central planners and the elite are so afraid of, is maybe they're going to push us into this corner here that humanity is just going to say, we're done with you. We don't even need your systems. We're doing it here locally. So step off for everything. And that's a polite way to put it. But I could see the decoupling now. And once that transition comes, once the cord is cut, it's never coming back. I mean, you look at it today, the everything in terms of investment and these letters of credit and all these things that are bringing our food and keeping our food moving with the supply chains. You just don't buy a container full of can of something and pay cash for it. Everything's on credit, and now it's locked up even tighter than 2008, and the whole real estate, and there's all these defaults and banks now withholding government stimulus money. And there's so much going on now across the economic landscape that you just couldn't even consider that the functionality of supermarkets and the movement of food is going to continue indefinitely. Now, perhaps for now, these couple of months it will, but definitely stretching out into the future. If you can just start to get to that, we don't even need these people in anymore. We don't need the supply chains anymore. We can get it done more locally. Now, local supply chains, obviously within your city, but something that's coming from halfway across the planet is just not needed, or something that's coming, from where you live in California all the way over to Tennessee. We just don't need that large transit movement to get that good here. We can do it ourselves here. So once we start shifting into, we can do it ourselves. We don't need that whole central planning elite system anymore. That is truly the power break that we need for everybody to start thinking of new systems, new ideas, and the way to couple that together so we really truly can take that step and break free. No more taxes, no more centralized control. and just letting us live our lives like we want to in the light, moving through to help and stay with humanity. I'm part of it too. If our channel disappears, my channel disappears. I'm another guy out here growing food just like you are. So that's my final statement. Think about the shift of, we just don't need that anymore, and step away and start making changes to actuate on that.
Absolutely. And that's going to happen. There's a lot of that will, as time progresses, happen organically. And that's why I really emphasize that we in this channel right now who can see the trajectory already have to be the people that plant that first round of seeds that then give us an abundance of potatoes to share with everybody else however many months or weeks from now, as they say, boy, I need to be growing food. And suddenly there's no, there's already one bag per shopping trip of potatoes. So that as these things are clamping down, we have to be responding and be pre-positioning these things. We're not just growing food for our families. We are literally growing the seed crop, the seeds for tomorrow. And it's up to us.
The seeds for a new world, the seeds for a new society, seeds for a new era that we've just entered. It's so exciting that the changes that can be had now versus being locked, like for some reason, the unlock allowed us, even in the lockdown, we're really unlocked. If you think about it in the way the minds, like these different, the cap has been released in the pressure keg, at least for a little while, to allow all different minds, thoughts, ideas to just, circulate around. And the seed of change is here. So start the first seeds into the planting and beginnings of a new era of harvest for our souls, our thoughts, our minds, our families and communities and society, the way we move around. Hopefully it'll be a more free time where we can actually follow our true passions versus being locked in because you had to make dollars. I'm hoping that we can go back to a more, a blend between the non-pressure keg and being able to live sustainable lives with high quality foods, be using food as our medicines and, being able to come together as a human species instead of so divided like we've been taught to be. We just are not like that. Normally we're taught to be that way. So I'm hoping that there's a huge transition here, and maybe, a lot of ancient traditions talked about this being the time. So embrace it, relish the changes, know that change is going to be the new constant. It's been forecast for thousands of years and we're here at it. And you should be jumping to the ceiling with joy that we're here at this time where we have a new beginning and we can manifest and change this world. Truly.
Absolutely. Well said, David. And thanks again for having me on. You can find my work at iceagefarmer.com. And that's a direct link rather than trusting YouTube to stick around. I know we both have channels on bitshoot.com/iceagefarmer for mine as well. And for better and worse, there's a lot of stuff happening really quickly right now. So I've also been tweeting a lot and interacting with people like meat packers and ranchers, and they all have their different perspectives and they're often quite different. And so there's value in trying to sort of like keep an eye on how everyone else out there is processing the situation in real time, because they have different pieces of the puzzle and it's important to put that together as best we can. But it all, all of these things, again, just to make it clear, all of those things may remain in our sphere of interest, but our sphere of control, what we can actually do to change our material situation here, is all about growing food and spreading the word.
And you had a Patreon channel as well, right?
I do. Yep. I've got a Patreon and a subscribe star if you prefer that.
How do we find that? Just Ice Age Farmer at Patreon?
Absolutely. Patreon.com/iceagefarmer.
And I also have Adapt 2030. Yay. So see how we're both similarly on different platforms. BitChute, which I like too, because it's censorship free. And then another one, Brighteon. So myself, I'm backing up all the videos that I do and have been for the last year or so on those two venues. And I know, Christian, you have quite a few different videos and series backed up there too. Are you on Library as well? Is that another place that I've seen you before?
No, just BitChute and DTube until they sort of...
DTube, that was it.
Yeah. That thing has sort of gone downhill. I tried to stick with it as long as I could, and then upload stopped working forever. So no longer there. But iceagefarmer.com is a privately hosted server where I keep everything mirrored there. And so in a worst case scenario, you can find everything directly there.
All right. And thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you got something out of the video. Please let us know what you liked about this, or the things that you thought were valuable, or what are you doing in your communities right now? Leave a link in the description box below, and either Christian or myself will try to get back to you with some different comments. And also I will leave all of Christian's information here, especially the websites he just mentioned there, and the BitChute and the Patreon channel so you can get a hold of Christian's work here. Incredibly valuable, so much to learn. And, you know, in the amount of interviews you've done, you're touching into a whole different realm, like you said, with the ranchers and the meat producers and that kind of genre where I'm not in there. But, you know, again, it's just about circulating information to really see, to get a more complete picture. So please go over Ice Age Farmer and check out his work over there. Until we see you next time, thanks for watching and enjoy your weekend. I hope you got something positive out of tonight's thing. That was the whole purpose, to try to send you away on a Friday night with a smile, hopefulness. So tomorrow morning when you wake up, you're going to think about maybe going and getting some seeds and starting something in your own garden. Even if it's a little cup, just plant one seed.
It makes all the difference. Thanks again, David, and thanks everyone.
All right. Ciao for now. Bye.